Good morning. Thank you for coming. It's always joyful. It's always fun for me to come to these because I get to see clients that I haven't seen or ever met. But when, all of you are here because you've looked at this endeavor for RV and boat storage as something you want to get into or something that you want to expand into. We've been doing feasibility studies for 22 years for both RV boat and self-storage. Some of them are tandem projects where people have both uses. Some of them are singular use for RV and boat only. I think the biggest one I've done to date other than Bob is about 1,200 stalls. It's a mostly open facility in California. They started, their rates were $75 a month, which we thought, back in 2009 was like, yes. And now they're $300 a month for an open stall. So, every market is just a little bit different when it comes to feasibility. The feasibility portion of your project should occur before your money goes hard on your dirt. Yeah, and then I have clients that come and say, well, we're married to this piece of dirt, what can we do? So as feasibility, we're looking at a lot of different aspects of your facility. We're looking at supply and demand, which is, the number of stalls in your market, the sizes of those stalls, how many are full, how many are empty, what's in the construction pipeline as well. I actually think the construction pipeline right now is more critical to know than what's existing, because there is so much activity in RV and boat and self-storage, so you really need to know what's coming up in your marketplaces. So we have an analytic program that we've designed in 22 years that will accomplish telling us, how many stalls are in a market from the supply and demand, and then we go into algorithms of demographics that will tell us how many more stalls will that market absorb. And then we back into that to what sizes should those stalls be. If you're in Minnesota, you're going to have a smaller size stall because you have so many boats in Minnesota. Demographics for boaters and household users. Each state has its own denominator for how many boats are in play. California is 1.88 boats for every 100 people. Minnesota is 8.37 boats for every 100 people. So that drives a little bit of the stall size that you're going to look at. And that's a little bitty tiny little screen. Sorry about that. So when you look at RV and boat, the other denominator that drives it as far as demographics is your household income. We just take out, as a matter of fact, everybody that's $62,000 in income and lower gets deducted from our analysis off the top. It's going to be the higher income level households that have the boats and the bigger RVs and the diesel pushers. So you want to make sure you're in a marketplace that has that depth of income, because they may not store over in a different area of town where the socioeconomics are different. They may not store in a very lower crime-ridden area, even though you found this great 15 acres. They may not want to store their rig down there. So the location in relation to the population that uses you is very critical. So you've got your number of households. Typically in a given marketplace, you have one storable RV in every 13 households. We back out from that number when we look at density of a marketplace. If you've got a very super dense, deep, urban Phoenix marketplace, they can't store anything near their home because there's no land. So that works into the demographics of the supply and demand. If you're in a rural marketplace, you back down from your supply and demand because a lot of people store their rigs at home because they actually have the room. So there's a lot of different factors that go into the demographic makeup of an analysis. You actually have two different types of facilities, which most people don't realize. You've got your deep urban facility, which is closer to urban core, where everybody says, I want to store close to home because I play everywhere. So I want to be able to get in my rig and go north, south, east, or west. And then you have the folks that say, I want to store up by Yellowstone because that's the only place we like to play. So that would be called a destination facility. Both of them are very viable. When you look at destination, you're looking at number of campgrounds as an interesting statistic of demographics. Because a lot of those campground users are actually storage users as well. Because they may pull their rig out and go to the fancy campground, but then they want to store close to where they play. So you have those types of facilities. When you look at the acreage of a facility, it's not an easy denominator to off the cuff say, oh, you've got 10 acres and you should be able to put 550 stalls on there. If you're long and skinny, you don't get as many stalls because you have to worry about the ingress and egress to those stalls. So you lose a lot of efficiency on a long, skinny parcel. I worked on a parcel in California, if anybody's familiar where the blimp is, off of the 405. This parcel is 125 foot wide by 3,000 foot long. So this guy did this fancy calculation and he told me we're going to have 1,478 stalls. And I came up with 700 once it was designed because otherwise you're just packing them in, you can't get to them because you have to have a road. So the size of your parcel and the dimensions of your parcel are critical to review and look at and say, can I get a maximum amount of single and tandem stalls? Or am I gobbling up my land in drive aisles just to access those stalls? So it's real important to understand how that plays before you go into a situation where you're hard on the parcel. You need to understand what your efficiency is actually going to be. And you can flip it. Okay, shipments. Everybody asked me, well, is RV and boat storage as a whole going to just stop? You know, is there a point in time where there's never going to be able to be any new facilities? Well, as long as the shipments are still being shipped for new rigs, you will always have a movement within the industry. And I know a lot of you all are self-storage owners as well. So when Fred lost his job and he has to get rid of unit A5, which is a 10 by 10, he had a garage sale and sold everything, cleans out his unit. Let's say George lost his job and he has to sell his RV. He sold it to John. John is probably still going to have to store it. The commodity of RV and boat physicalness does not change, it just continually increases. So you don't have a situation where you're going to run out of boats and RVs that need to be stored. Even if someone sells their rig, they still have to store it. So it's a funny phenomenon difference between self-storage and RV and boat storage. And along that line, the economic issue of RV and boat storage is they also never leave your facility. I mean, once they're there, they don't leave because they're afraid they're going to lose their stall. So they're going to go to Florida for 4 months of the year and they're going to pay for their stall because they don't want to come home and not have it. So as a manager, you can take advantage of that person that wants to leave for 4 months or 5 months, sublease their stall. You give your client half off of his rent, so he's joyful because he still has his stall, and you sell it to Fred for those 4 months for full price. So now you're making 1.5 times on that stall when someone is gone for a period of time. So as a note to self, there's ways to take advantage of that, but you have to be very management friendly with your clients. You know, you have to know what they're doing. They have to be comfortable calling and saying, hey, we're going to go to Florida. Can you put me on the sublet side of the equation? So there's ways to make extra money, which people don't think of. But that can be pretty dramatic if you're in an area where they really use the rigs a lot and go play. So it's a good way of making a little bit of extra money. Cost is a factor. We can leave it at that one. When you look at the price that people have paid for their rigs in the past versus what they're paying for those rigs now, that also plays into the income level that you can charge. Because it's, you know, someone's not storing old mattresses and old couches of moms in self-storage with no value. You know, they have a $150,000 or $200,000 rig that they're storing. They want to make sure that it's secure. They can easily get to it. They can get in, they can get out. Ingress and egress of your RV and boat storage facility is critical. You do not want to have too short of width drive aisles, so they have to hink their vehicle 55 times to get out, because they're going to be cranky by the time they get on the road. So 35-foot drive aisles on an angle stall at a minimum is the width of your drive aisles. And this is interesting, you know, people have a tendency, and cities do this as well, especially when they're going to charge you for your sewer charge for your dump. Yes, sir?
You said 35 foot at an angle. What about straight out?
Straight out, about 50, because you're just not going to have the turning availability to turn that rig. Now, if you're doing enclosed RV and boat perpendicular, you can actually angle the interior demising wall, and then they can still get some of that angular issue. Most people don't use their rigs as much as we think they're going to. And when you look at how the cities charge for dump stations, you know, a lot of them go oh, everybody's going to dump every day and your sewer usage charge is going to be off the charts. But when you actually realize how much they use the dump station, you can help back out some of those costs for your dump station. So people don't use them as much as you think, actually. They just store them and keep them. So very, very different. You have the different types of facilities. You have outdoor covered, individual units, which are your garage units where you have 4 walls and a door. And then you have valet storage, or what we call bullpen storage. And that's where somebody has a great old big, huge warehouse and they concierge park those units because they're stacking them back to back. The difficulty with the bullpen is you have to have really, really good staff to move those units, because you may have to, you know, Fred is back at the back, and you may have to move 15 vehicles to get him out. So you have to have a big staging area on a bullpen, a secure area, and you want to have a lot of staff available on Labor Day weekend, because if they don't call, you have 583 people that all want to move out on Saturday morning at 7 o'clock. So bullpens are not my favorite to work with. They're not as efficient. It takes an awfully big building to get any efficiency of number of units. Supply and demand we talked about. And the age is changing. You know, it used to be the users of RVs and boats were 65 years old and older. You know, when my dad was still driving his rig at 80, it scared me to death when he got on the road with that thing. It was like, oh man, everybody get off of the road.
What's wrong with 80?
Well, I'm coming up on you. I'm coming right behind you. So it's actually trending downwards, that the users are a little bit younger, a little bit more mobile, not physically, speaking of the mobile of my hips, but they are changing, and they're a very wealthy class of client. So when you look at your physical user themselves, they're very wealthy. They have a big rig or a really nice boat that they're storing. So if you ever dance in, what do they do? Why do they have these big rigs? Well, the next step up from RV storage, even though that's why we're here, is campgrounds. And then that has some steps to it, because they like to go play. So if you can place your facility in a position where it makes sense to where they want to go play, it gives them good ingress and egress. Your supply and demand is sound. You have good movement within the industry as far as sale of vehicles and new vehicles moving in that market, then you'll probably do very well. Supply and demand charts kind of look like that. And if anybody wants this PowerPoint, just let me know at the end of the day. Give me your card and stuff, and I'll send it to you. I don't mind. But we back out a lot of items. We don't heavy-hand it on the supply and demand where you have enough room for 2,842 stalls more, because that's kind of like, yeah, really? How come? So we back out by income level, we back out by number of households and density. So we're actually very, very conservative when we look at that number. Amenities. The amenities are really tracking to what you have at the bigger self-storage facilities when you're a larger facility. You're going to have, you know, computerized access that lock them in and lock them out if they haven't paid their bill. Your access gates, your dump station, your wash bays, laser alarms, fire hydrants on site. You may have detailing. If you detail, it would be a subcontract item because you don't want to have someone's keys. Once you have someone's physical keys to their rig, your insurance falls to care, custody, and control. And your insurance carrier will assume that your employee, George, will drive away with every vehicle on the lot and it's too expensive to afford. So there's a lot of things you can add to your facility that make it comfortable for your clients. The ladies here and the grandmas here will understand this one. I like to put play yards in by the office where you key code in and key code out, and you have to sign your life away that if Johnny falls off the thing and breaks his arm, it's not my fault. Because a little 3-year-old, when he gets out of that rig and mom's moving all the stuff and putting it in the car, you can lose him in an RV facility because he is the same size as the wheels. So if you have a play yard, mom and the kids will like that because it keeps them out of harm's way. Same as dogs. My son is 42. He has a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old and a big giant dog, and he spent 36 days on the road last summer going across country in the RV with those. I would have beaten myself with a stick, but they do. You know, it's interesting. They use the vehicles as a second home. So when you can give them things like an owner's lounge, where they know when they bring their rig in, they can stop, take their breath, check their emails, get some coffee. So they're not just rush, 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 rush. They love you. Self-storage users, they're there because they've had a death or a divorce or just too much stuff like me. Your RV and boat users, they love to play and they love their rigs. So if you play to that and take care of them like their family, one, they never leave. You have to put in their lease, we're going to give you a 5% increase every year in rent. Otherwise, you never get to change your rates. But it's an interesting phenomenon of user difference. These are the enclosed stalls. This is one way to do the angled demising wall where you dogleg the building. One of my clients in Fresno, actually we ended up just switching and angle the interior demising wall, even though it was perpendicular to the drive aisle. And it gave him a lot more efficiency of getting in and out of those units, because really getting into a perpendicular unit is hard. I mean, it takes a good driver to do that. This is the bullpen I was talking about, and they're just cumbersome, I think. Now, Minnesota, you got these great old, big old dairy barns, and they do bullpen storage in the winter, but the thing is you move your rig in the winter, and you don't have access to it until April. So that's very different. Canopy stalls, same. You can have the perpendicular stalls or the angle stalls. Bobs are always at an angle, so they're easy to get into, easy to get out. Oh, I have a button. Okay, travelers. When you talk about, again, the demographic of your users, it plays to the demographic user, again, of how they play. How many of them actually use that rig? How many of them go every year? How many months? And you can trend your units and know those units that are going to be empty, again, to pick up that extra rent on a sublease. I don't have much more, but I want to open the floor up to questions because I know y'all ask me as many great questions as I come up with answers. So, anybody have any questions?
What do you see for the rest of this year for RV deliveries?
He's asking how about RV deliveries for the rest of this year. Still very, very high. They're being impacted by steel and rubber because they can't get some of their components. So they're having a little bit of a problem in their own supply chain, but those rigs are already accounted for. So, you know, once the steel issue gets taken care of, it will increase. Yes, sir. It's one storable RV or boat, or RV, I'm sorry, in every 13 households. And it's 13 households of certain economic levels and certain density levels. Yes, sir. You know, a lot of times they just don't leave once they've entered your facility because they're afraid they're going to lose their stall. So if you haven't accommodated for an annual increase in rents, you can't easily get up to what that new facility in town is charging, just by virtue of being new, because you didn't have that in your lease. You just don't want to surprise them at the end of every year and increase it, so just put it in the lease so they know. Yes, sir.
Is the RV and boat data you show state by state, is that publicly available through, like on a county by county?
That one was boats, and I'll be more than happy to send you the boat chart. Just, make a note later. And it goes state by state. And what's interesting is some of the charts you can go into and you can see the shipments state by state. So you don't want to be in a state that has no shipments or very limited shipments. You want to be in a state that has a little bit more. Yes, sir. You can do a little bit of both. If you do have a space that is a designated wash bay, and it's almost like you're driving into a larger masonry building, so to speak, because they need to be able to walk up the stairs on the side to wash the top of their rig. So you've got the different levels of wash bay. You have a washout area where they just want to wash off their wheels and wash the mud off. Then you have the ones that want the real wash bay so they can wash down. And then you may have the ones that have just detail only, and that's when you're subcontracting that. If you're probably, I would say 400 stalls and under, a true wash bay is not going to pay for itself because not enough clients use it. So they would be more washout areas. When you get into the larger facilities, that's when they're going to have, and it's a cost benefit, definitely. No, typically it's just part of their lease. I have some clients that are in marketplaces where they do the wash bays outside the gate, and it's actually a standalone separate business, and then it's actually utilized by the community as well. So sometimes that's a way to make it pay for itself. $6,500 to $8,500 a study, depending on how many comps that we have to work with. Yes, sir.
Wireless vehicle alarm.
Yes.
What is that?
It's just an RFID alarm that's in the rig, and it's on. So when that rig leaves, if it's not been disconnected, it'll let a client know that you just drove off. So, RFID? It's an RFID alarm. They use them a lot in the big tractor trailer rigs, actually. And you find them within that realm of anybody else. Oh, come on, guys. Yes. What a reverse feasibility study is, we have the two different types of studies. We have a site-specific where you bring me that 10 or 15 acres, or 2 or 3 acres if it's self-storage. And then we have what we do is called a reverse feasibility study, and we designed them in 2006 because people brought us really stupid pieces of dirt. And it's like, wow, they don't get something. Their money's already hard. They're already committed on this dirt. So what the reverse feasibility study, instead of you bringing me a parcel and I have to make the market fit to your parcel, I find the holes in the market that fit to what you want to do. And then you go land hunting at that point. Same physicalness of a build, we're still looking at supply and demand, we're looking at the comps, we're looking at the growth, but we're also, in today's marketplace, we're also looking at the price of those rental units. It's really tough to make canopies pencil at 30 cents a foot. I mean, you can hardly do it. So the rental rates that are in your area are paramount to know, also along with the feasibility aspect when we're looking at unit mix, are those rents actually high enough today and what we think they're going to be at 24 months from now when you open to support the cost of construction. So reverse feasibility study, we find the holes in the market and help you find that perfect fit for what you're wanting to build. Yes, sir. Yeah, highest rate that I've found on canopy is about $1.17 a foot in the Florida marketplace. $1.17 for a canopy per foot. Yeah. I did a double take. I mean, I looked at those rates and I,
And that city was?
no. Yes, sir.
6,500 will let you know.
I'm sorry.
Have you done correlation between household income and achievable rates?
Yes. Yeah. You don't want to be, the lower income areas, one, they don't have the bigger rigs for one, and that plays to your mix. If you're in an area that the average household income is 60 or 65, your stall price sizes are going to gravitate to the 30 and 35. You're not going to have very many 40s and 45s just because of that household income range. And again, if you're in Minnesota and you have the 8.37 boats per 100 people, you're going to gravitate to even smaller in your canopies as well. If you're doing canopy or enclosed, 12 by 30 is the biggest you would build. Because even with a trailer hitch, you're not going to typically extend past that 30 feet. Yes, sir.
So you said $1.17.
$1.17 square foot.
Square foot,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Amy. I know we have a lot of people to get on the boat.